morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. There's always some, right at the very end. It's just the dog ate their homework. They're finishing it on the bus on the way in. That's it. Right. Good morning, everyone. Very good to see you all. It's the first time we've got together as a group since, quite a while now, it feels like anyway. But it's very good to see you. Thank you for coming. This morning's session is very much in the same format as you would have had before. So we have a panel of speakers from Valonetic. We have yourselves who will be able to ask questions at the end. But before that, we're going to have a bit of a presentation about the testing program in detail. So that's really the sort of the way this session is going to work out. It's an hour as per usual. No fire drills expected. The exits are where you came in. So just remember where that is and we'll all be fine. Okay, there we are. A bit of rumble from the engine starting there, I think, wherever that is from. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping. If we can keep questions to the section about questions, that would be much appreciated. And also, when you have a question, put your hand up. The mic will come to you. There'll be two people with mics walking around. If you could introduce yourself, simply name, company, that would be great. And if you wouldn't mind keeping to one question per question opportunity, that would be very much appreciated. I think we're taxiing to the runway. I hope the thrusters don't kick in before we actually get going. But let me introduce the panel. So we have Sam. We have Ben and we have Sean from Valonetic. Sam, I'm sure, will be familiar to many of you as you've dealt with when you've been onboarding on the testing side of the program. Ben is new on the program in terms of looking after the whole direction of the testing. And then, of course, we have Sean, who is also very familiar to you. It seems that this is definitely not my stomach, by the way. I'll just say that at the very outset. It is being recorded, so if you want to pass the recording on to your colleagues, maybe they can edit that last bit out. I don't know. But yeah, without further ado then, what I'd like to kick off with is invite Sam up to talk about the testing program and walk you through what's been going on. Sam.
Hello. I'm going to apologise in advance because I've got a big enough mouth and they've decided to put a mic on me today, so cover your ears a little bit for that part of it. We're going to start off, Marek's just spoke through all the guys, and I'm moving on my slide, but not there. We're going to cover four main areas. So we're going to give you an overview of what we're expecting from when we enter vendor testing, and that will include some of the scope that we'll be looking to be able to cover. We'll give you a progress update on how we're getting on so far with what we're doing with DXC ISB, and then we're going to show you a draft testing timeline based on what we're doing across the whole testing program there. So some of this might be familiar with you from some of the other slides that you've seen previously. And we wanted to kind of just define what we're looking to do with vendor testing here. One of the key things I want to make sure we pull out from what we're looking to do is make sure that EDIs are a very big part of what we're doing on vendor testing, but it's not the only part. We do need to look at the connectivity as well. So we do mention message types. When we talk message types, that does include the DRI messaging into us and also what's attached to WriteBack and in CWTs as well, etc. So please bear in mind it will cover everything you do today, but into the testing environment. Now, when we're looking at vendor, there's 25 vendors that will be in vendor testing. And that does include 8 self-builds, because what we did was we identified that there was some scope that wouldn't have been covered across the 25 vendors because these were self-builds. They needed to be included as a vendor as well in their own right. The main purpose of what we do on the EDI side, just so we're all aware of that as well, is we will have all set you up already from an onboarding to act as your broker or carrier counterpart. Now, be able to do that means you can play the role of the customer that you operate for. So that would mean you would send us items in, and then we would be able to send the EDIs that were relevant out. If you're a vendor that actually ingests the EDIs, we would expect that to be a part of your journey as well. So the EDIs would be there to be received, validated, and ingested into your systems as well. We have started this work with DXC ISB. So although they are one vendor, across that vendor, it does cover 3 equivalents of what they do for brokers and 9 lots of the carrier. So it does give us quite a bit of coverage. And the reason why we've started there is it makes sense to pair that kind of what we're doing with our UAT area. So this gave us assurance before we opened up, using some of the lessons learned we had from last year, to make sure that we could actually pass it on to the wider vendor session. So anyone who supported Vanguard would have understood it was a little bit back and forth when we was finding defects, because of the nature of what we was doing on the end-to-end scenarios was slightly different. When we do start the vendor testing, which you'll see a timeline later on in the slide, there we are putting you into groups. Now, there's 5 groups in total. Now, the reason we're doing 5 groups is because there'll be different functionality available at different points, depending on as and when UAT pass it on as we go through the testing throughout the year. Now, within these groups, there'll be different functionalities available. Some of that, for example, laws you'll see later on will be something later on. So we will work with you ahead of time to work out when that time's right for you, based on what you need for sign-off in order to operate in the new world as well. We will also bring back our monthly briefing sessions. So although we'll be touching base with you quite a lot, I think it's really good as a community that we make sure that we stay together as well, so that if we're seeing issues in one place, we can discuss it as a wider group. So that will be something we'll start bringing in as well. Now, looking at scope, we've started off with just showing this as the first 8 points there as the scope. And as you can see, it's quite high level. Premiums, for example, we know there'll be lots of functionality that would come off the back of that. But I just wanted to give you an idea of when we enter vendor testing, this is already some of the scope that we should be looking to start with. And when we say the scope would have been signed off from UAT, and hopefully as well, we'd have seen that progress with DXC ISB as well. So you won't be testing something for the first time, brand new. There would have been a variety of checks that would have happened up front as well then. We've covered off right back in CWT. You can see as 0.7 there, but we're also aware that there is other messages above there. You can see the submission types for DRI and the LIMCLIM. So again, how they interact as you're submitting a claim and the notifications you expect to get in and out from that side. Laws would be covered under the reinsurance. It's not a functionality that we're currently testing in UAT at the moment, but that would be another scope that we would add to it, which again, as we go to the timeline, you'll see more functionality added there as well. So just to give you an update on what's happening with the progress so far. As I said, we've split it into 2 sections. So you've got DXC ISB, and then the all just at the bottom there. We started in December linking in with DXC ISB. There was the onboarding process we had to go through, and there was connectivity we had to make sure. Anyone who's been using DRI as the broker side will know that you've got to connect in using the party portal, make sure the cert's up to date, and that we can connect into the market. Christmas was never going to be a good time to start doing that, because obviously you guys are very busy, and we was also running along with our testing criteria. So it took us a little bit longer to do that. But we've now got some good end-to-end scenarios that we can use for the DRI testing when we open that up further. 2 of the 3 broker products for DXC are already connected, and we're waiting to do the 3rd one. The reason why the 3rd one's took a little bit longer, again, if anyone's been supporting a Vanguard customer, you may be familiar with the environment that we're working from, or was working from, was 14.1. The good news is we've gone up to 22.1 now. So for the last month, we've been doing internal smoke tests to make sure the functionalities that we've seen previously working are working. And we're currently got DXC ISB on hold there until early May. So once we've got that in, we'll then hopefully get that 3rd one in quite easily as well. It's just been on hold because it didn't make sense to do that connectivity testing until we had the update. That update allowed us to have the additional scope as well, in case anyone was thinking of what they'd known from before as Vanguard. It had actually caught us up quite a bit with all the different functionalities that will now be available to test. Once we do get that environment updated, we will run some regression testings with DXC ISB, and then we can start adding that additional functionalities in there as well, which will allow us to cover off the EDIs that they would be looking to perform as well. You'll see a slide later on in the session this afternoon that there's 67 EDIs, and there's 5 additional that are going to be added. So we will then cover those once they become available as well. I think we've got quite a bit of coverage. All 25 standard EDIs will be covered within the DXC testing. And that reason why that's important is, as you know, the bespoke and the Accord for All are all built off the standard. So although we won't necessarily have signed off the exact EDI when you come to enter, we will know that the standard is in a lot better space, which we can then have your feedback on the additional ones. So although it won't have full coverage with DXC ISB, it will give us a good enough coverage to then move on to the next set of testing we've got to do. So what does it mean for you guys on the bottom at the bottom there with the all? We're going to be showing detailed timelines on the next slide. This is a point very much dependent on what we have signed off, like I say, via UAT and DXCISB, but we wanted to give you an indication on where we're looking to do. And we will then start in the next few weeks reaching back out to you, those of you that were involved with the onboarding process. We'll make sure that your certs are up to date, the correct users are there, and we'll start having some conversations with you around what scope you want to do, and also the EDIs that you'll be looking to run off the back of that as well. It's just as important to make sure we're doing some of those negative tests as well as the positive ones we want to do. We will be using our route scenarios. So we've got the Velinetic route scenarios, which are linked to our service catalogue. And we have now been creating the end-to-end scenarios off the back of that. Very much aware that what we're doing at Velinetic is a big part of how we all work together as a market. So that will give us an idea on what you want to test, and we'll be starting working with you on test data as well. The next bit here is just around the timeline. Sorry, I keep forgetting to click. So a bit of an indication. You can see the red triangle. We are in the cycle at the moment for UAT cycle 1. That is due to be complete by the end of this month. We've got a fire break straight after as well, just to do some lessons learned and catch up with the defects and any of the items that we've caught there. DXCISB remains in acceptance testing because, as I said, we're working very closely with them as part of our acceptance testing before we pass off. The wider vendor session is the lighter colour blue at the bottom. So this would be when it really plays for what you guys want to test and how you can then work with your customers to give you the assurance as well. These are the 5 cycles. So you can see vendor 1 and 2 is 1 cycle, 3 and 4, and then you've got 5, 6, and 7. The reason why we have the 6 and 7 there is because if you were in 1 and only in 1, you may want to come back to do some additional checks towards the end of the vendor cycles, either to do your own regression testing or because of additional functionalities being made available there. So it'll give you the opportunity to come back in. And this is when I say we'll be working with you to make sure we put you in the right cycle. We could be pairing you with the different other vendors that you might also operate with in the market at the moment. We're very much aware that some people have already started to do that amongst themselves. So we'll be working with you as much as possible to make that journey as nice and simple as what we can do. That was the main bits I just wanted to cover off because I know a lot of people hadn't seen it today. I'll leave that on the screen because there might be some bits. I already saw some people with their phone out. I'm assuming they wasn't taking a picture of me. But there's there for some points if anyone wants to raise it. And I think I'm passing it back to Marek.
Lovely. Sam, thank you very much.
That's okay.
Excellent walking through the programme so far. It might be, well, I know you'll have lots of questions, but again, if you could just hold off for a minute while we talk a little bit more in the broad sense about testing. And in that respect, Ben, you are new to the programme here and a new face on this particular, for this particular audience. I wonder if you wouldn't mind giving us a couple of minutes or so about your role and how you see the programme. I think when we spoke a little bit earlier on the way in, you said it felt like jumping onto a moving train. And I sort of talked about James Bond scenarios, but there's none of that going on here today. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Marek, and good morning, everybody. I guess initial observations. So I joined probably beginning of March, and there were lots and lots of different phases underway, lots of good progress being made in different places. I think 2 real focus areas from a vendor perspective. First point is around bringing together those test efforts, bringing together the right people with the right accountabilities, and making sure we've got the right sequential activity running through. So Sam's talked about the relationship between upstream test, system integration test, down to BUAT, business and user acceptance testing, and then down into vendor, and making sure that effectively we are proving and validating the scenarios before we then attempt to test them in vendor. I think that's been one of the first focus areas, just bringing the plan together. I think the second point that's most relevant for this is all things environments. I think any program I've ever worked on, environment management, environment readiness, having the right number of environments is probably the most critical aspect. As Sam said, the plan was that the relevant environment for vendor, the LHR environment, was quite aged. And so we knew that the first thing we needed to do was bring that up from 6 increments of the code base that had all been tested upstream in SIT. So getting through that, making sure that the right content landed in the right way was was the other key focus area.
Okay, that's great. And so from your perspective, obviously I know, having spoken with most of you, if not all of you, then it's been really clear that you're all itching to get your hands on the test environment. I think having also dealt with the guys at ISB, I know some of the, let's just say, the challenges they've been through, and I think you should all be very, very calm and content that other people are going through those hard yards, basically, kind of on your behalf. And I think the idea is that essentially you will get something that is much smoother to work with, so that you're able to do your testing and assure your clients that everything is working to your satisfaction before everything moves into the wider client area, or client arena rather, to do the testing there. So yeah, that's kind of the plan, and I think that we're pretty much on track for that, aren't we? Yeah, that sounds all very good. If that's the kind of formal chalk and talk part of the session over, really I think it's about time to open it up for questions. We've got some microphones, as I said, around the room, so please put your hand up and introduce yourselves. I know there are some issues that we are talking about and are in flight in terms of some of the big issues. I know one of the things that we've talked about would be around some of the EDIs, which we've had one-to-one conversations about. So that's pretty much, we think, sorted now, and so that's all fine. There's another question that's come up around some of the write-back responses from the servers. That's also in consideration now, so we're not expecting to have a deep dive about that today. But we wondered if, what other questions you might have. This is your opportunity this morning to have these conversations, more deeply technical conversations. This afternoon, when the main body of the audience will be here, we're kind of expecting more business-focused questions to come up, resource-focusing, and so on, resource-focused questions rather. So if you've got the questions, now really is the opportunity. Try and be not so English and reserved about it. Think about those questions that you've remembered. Excellent. And Rich has taken the bait. Excellent. So kick off. Thank you.
Couldn't leave you to pad too long, Marek.
Thank you.
Hi, Rich Birch, Verisk. We're in no rush to start testing unless we have a sense of the coverage and the quality of what our friends at DXC have been doing. Is there any chance we can have a formal entry gateway where coverage and quality is communicated to us so we can inform ourselves on whether it's worth starting testing? So things like knowing what messages have been tested, the scenarios, outstanding defects.
Yeah, I can go first.
Yeah,
There might be bits
I'll
you add
yep.
to it. So exactly that. So when we do go to start the lighter blue at the bottom, we do have our own entry criteria as well. Hopefully that might align with ones for yourself. That will be a part of the conversation. So we can make sure if you are someone that's only interested in a called for all, just as an example, we can show you what we've done as a called for all already. We haven't got the coverage across everything with what we're doing with DXC ISB, as I said, but we can then start to show what we've done, which might give you the assurance that I'm ready to start now. So I think that will be a part of the monthly sessions, but also the more direct one-to-one sessions we'd be having with you as well, in order to make sure that the scenarios that have been run for all the markets or whichever area you want to focus in. But I think that does form part of our entry criteria, which I don't know if we're showing later on, but it'll be something definitely we can be more visual on showing you as we start to do this engagement over the next few weeks.
Thank you. Not another question, just a statement. So if I'm asked by my clients whether there will be one, I will respond that there is going to be, because for their own exit plan signing, they've insisted upon us having sight of that.
Yeah, exactly that. And so we would have the entry criteria ahead of that as well.
Okay, thanks very much, Rich. John.
Thank you. John Earl, Charles Taylor. One of the key things that our clients are going to want to test are in-flight transactions. What efforts are being made by the testing team to populate the relevant data in the heritage systems so we can get that data into our systems ahead of the actual testing cycle?
Can you take that?
Yeah, absolutely. So all things reach-back scenarios is a critical part of the scope of the program that we're running on. to my mind, probably non-functional test and reach back scenarios are going to be two of the most complex areas. So right now we're working on detailed reach back approach documentation, which includes what we need from an environment readiness perspective, what we need from a data perspective, what we need from a data prep perspective. So once we've got that, we'll then be engaging via Sam, obviously, from a vendor perspective of, well, what do we need to do to make sure that's mirrored? That is very much, I'll be talking about this later on in the overall wider test update, but one of the key focus areas for the fire break between cycle 1 and cycle 2 is really getting to kind of real-world application of how those scenarios will be tested.
Sorry, can I just ask one more question? I know I only have one.
Okay.
Is vendor testing going ahead before Vanguard testing, or are they going to run in parallel?
So there'll be elements that would run in parallel. We have had feedback already how that could be onerous on you guys for resourcing, as we obviously, the Vanguard group will be dependent on the vendors for that. So that formed while me and Lindsay can't be here today, she's not very well, but she was going to do a bit of a chat to some of the people around how we're pairing Vanguard and the vendor together. So one of the self-builds is a Vanguard customer, for example. So me and Lindsay would work very closely with that. There's 5 vendors that are linked to Vanguard that are in the 25. So we'll make sure that if they want to be, they can be up front. So before their Vanguard customers doing it, they're getting the assurance that it's there, or they're aware if there is a defect that we're waiting to resolve. So we're very much, me and Lindsay are working together to make sure that it's not too onerous, like it was, I suppose, before, where you was having to service 2 different parts there.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. Thank you, Sam. Next question. Or are we really all going to go out for coffees really soon? Believe me, the lunch isn't being served yet. So, yeah, if there are questions, remember, this is your opportunity. And, yeah, we have Sian here as well, of course, who never usually gets off scot-free. But if today's the first day, that's not a bad thing at all. No? Well, we've really done the shortest session ever in that case from a vendor perspective. In which case, really last chance, any more for any more? Oh, here we are.
Costa from Chaucer. Just curious whether there'll be an arrangement to pair brokers with carriers. So we're one of the self-built vendors. So is there a similar arrangement to like CCT, for example?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so when we're looking at the groups that I mentioned, we're very much working with a broker vendor to pair it with a carrier vendor. Some of you will have both available. So the DXC ISB, for example, has 3 broker and the 9 carrier. But if you don't have your broker equivalent, we would pair you up with someone that's looking to do similar tests as well, which is a part of the work we're doing. So we've been doing that work and mapping them. So we've got the 4 groups that would be linking across there. It could be as well that you use your service company broker if you're not dependent on DRI or things like that to be able to test. But we would work with you and make sure both parties are getting the assurance there.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. And we have another question over here, lady.
Hi, Vicky Grimshaw, Antares. Just looking at the green, pale green, we realistically talking August? Start in the middle of the summer?
So yeah, cycle 5 after the UAT part should be around the August time.
Okay, I just need to go back and line up people, so not before August then. After August, are we saying?
I think August is the earliest at the moment that we're expecting it to be.
Okay.
The big dependency on that is it will be dependent on the blue above.
Yeah,
So-
I get that.
Yeah,
Well, I'm
so
just being
August
pushed
would
for
be the earliest.
a potential start date again,
Yeah.
and I don't want to start teeing people up too early.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's probably
So-
just worth clarifying. End of August is the expectation for cycle
End,
5.
yeah.
So
End.
late,
Yeah.
yes.
So September then.
Late August.
I'll go September then.
It must be something wrong with my mic.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much. And Anthony, you had the next question. Just here, Angie.
Anthony Freeman, Dockersoft. Sian, I didn't want to leave you out. A question that came up before is around specifications. So you guys are building a brand new system, but based on the old system. But what we're trying to understand is what's different. So it was mentioned that after the build was complete, the specs would be released. Is there any update on that?
All the EDI specs are published, so they're not in their final version until test is complete, and we've always said that. So we've built to spec. We fully expect there to be things wrong with the specs because they are old. We hope that there's not. We're not expecting the same level of inaccuracy on write back because it is a newer message type and the specs are updated. So well done as a community. But we have always said we'll publish them. They are published so that you know what we're working to. And we've always had comments from you guys where you've seen things where it maybe doesn't replicate like that in the live environment, and that's enabled us to do some tweaking in the background. That's the process that still stands. So what we're building against are the specs. What you will test and what you will receive and test it in is a message that reflects that spec. Like I say, as always, if you've got feedback on whether there's inaccuracies or questions around how those messages are received in the live environment today as part of the heritage estate, you know how to get to us either via the write-back community or individually through Jazzy or myself or for Alvaro. So they will be published in a draft state until we conclude testing, and at which point we will lock them down once all testing is complete and all the bugs that we find during testing are fixed.
Will draft versions be released just of any changes?
If they're not already on the website, I thought they were. If the right back ones aren't on the website, then I'll go away and I'll make sure that they're there. Everything should be there.
Okay, there are...
There's gaps.
There's specs there, but just in terms of any of those highlighted changes that potentially are just to make us aware of that, Thank you.
I think there's I know we weren't going to do it in too much detail, but just to sort of manage expectations around particularly the DRI piece around the retrieve write-back message where we're getting an error message that we weren't expecting. We are going to look at it. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to replicate heritage just because we want to replicate heritage. We still want it to be right. So when we find things that are behaving differently, we want to be able to look at it objectively and against industry standards and say, is this the right thing? So if there are bugs in heritage, we've got an opportunity to try and iron some of those out while we're rebuilding. So I don't want to cause panic. Anthony's just suddenly gone into panic mode. But if we find things that are in heritage that are wrong, we don't want to just replicate it just because it's in heritage. So it will be a consultative process. Obviously, you guys know right back probably better than we do. So we'll make sure that there's lots of communication around what's happening and, to your point, Anthony, differences between heritage. But just to manage expectations, we're not blindly replicating it just because it's there. It still has to be right and it still has to conform to industry standards. But we will work with you to get to that point.
Thanks, Sean.
Okay. Thanks, Anthony. Any more for any more?
Hi, I'm Sharon from GPM. What's your timescale for kind of contacting people? So when you know who's in number one, what's your sort of plan? Are you going to keep everybody else up to date as well?
Yeah, so we'll be having the monthly sessions, but we will also be, so in the next, I'd say 3 to 4 weeks, the vendors, my vendor team will be reaching out to engage with you guys to do the checks I said around onboarding, make sure you've got the right users on the system, and then we can start having those conversations. So then we'll make sure, because we've put some groups together, but actually from speaking with you guys, you may have some ideas and you may already have pairings amongst yourselves. So we'll be working as a group to make sure that that's in the right place. But I'd like to think before we close out May, you'll know what group you're in and who your broker or carrier equivalent is and what you're both expecting out of those tests and when they're likely to be. And then we'll move with timelines as we know the sign-off with UAT as well.
Is that with Vanguard in mind, kind of thing? So
yes, with Vanguard in mind. So Vanguard will also be working to the same blueness above there. So if UAT have signed something off, Vanguard will be given the same thing. So they will be having the same steer, which is why we're really clear to make sure that the Vanguard vendors are in the first part, if they want to be, because we know there's going to be a dependency on them to be supporting the Vanguard customer later on, or that same month with the same ask from there as well.
Hi, Chris from Morning Data. So what is the status of multi-account access for SFTP folders?
Do you want me to take that?
Go for it.
So it's in progress. So we understand the requirements. The build has been working with ASG to get that implemented. I don't think we've got a timeline on it yet. I'm looking at Alvaro, but he's not listening. We've got a timeline on it yet? SFTP multi-access? No. But we'll be something that we can let you. So Sam and I and Lindsay work very closely together, so I'm sure he will nudge me when you nudge him next, and we'll get you an answer. But we understand the requirements. It's something that will be delivered for phase 1.
Sorry, me again. On the Vanguard groups, are you going to keep them the same as they were before, if you can?
So I think the Vanguard 9 are going to be the first people forward. So there'll be I think there's a slide later on around the Vanguard.
What is that, this morning or this afternoon?
This afternoon, sorry. Yeah.
No, I may not stay for both sessions.
All the slides we'll put on the website as well, but I can make sure Lindsay links in with you because Lindsay's looking after more of the grouping. But I'm not aware the groups are changing other than the Vanguard 9 are going first.
Okay.
So we'll make sure we show those as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, who's next? Looking around for the hand. And I can't see any hands going up. In which case, we do all get to finish a bit early and have a chat. And there's plenty of time, obviously, for conversations to be had outside if you needed the more specialised or focused conversations, of course. And this afternoon, the update is very much around for the more general operations side of the organisations and the more business-focused side. So if there's anything else the panel would like to say? No? Sian? Ben?
Just thank
Sam?
you.
No? In which case, I'll say thank you to you all for coming up here today. Thank you for coming and joining us this morning. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the day for those of you who are staying. Thanks very much indeed.